it's Daria here. In this video, I'd like to talk to you about Jira because most likely as a Scrum Master, you will be working with a team at some point that uses Jira. And then I already showed you how you could use ZenHub, which is a very similar tool. Jira being the most popular tool, obviously shows that there is this necessity to know how it works, even if obviously Scrum Master is not a Jira admin. But I think you do need to know how it works so that you can help your team and your product owner more specifically to organize everything you have there and keep it up to date, keep it actually useful. For the team, we want it to allow them to track their work and be in the know on where they're at with progress and what they need to do next. For the product owner needs to have a holistic view of the product backlog, all of the items that are to be created or worked on, but also be able to use it to forecast. So creating some forecasts, maybe planning some releases, and just organize their work overall to have a better view of progress and be able to report on where the team is at with achieving their goals. And then, of course, you can use Jira to create more visibility with stakeholders. Maybe in a sprint review, you talk about the product backlog with your stakeholders. You can use Jira to show them what's going on in your product backlog. Let's jump into Jira and look at some of the most common tools and functionalities that you need to be familiar with if your team uses Jira to manage their work and their product backlog. Here I am at the main page, and yours might look a little bit different, but so far I think this is the latest view of Jira. As you can see, I have multiple projects here or multiple tabs, basically related to different products or different teams. We will be creating a new one. There are different types of Jira software. There is Jira Work Management. I am using Jira Software. I think there is a difference between those two, not sure what. We have Confluence, and I talked about Confluence in my previous video. So I'm going to link this down in the description so that you can go and check this out. We were creating team wiki pages. We have all of these projects. As you can see, there are lots of items that I was kind of testing, not as important right now. But what we want to do is to create a new project. So we're creating a new project and we can choose what we want to do, whether we want to create a Kanban, basically just a workboard, Scrum, or backtracking. I've never used this one, I think, because you can use Kanban for that too. So we will create a Scrum project because as a Scrum Master, most likely you are working with a team that is running sprints. It gives you ability to create sprints, and then you can create epics, stories, bugs, tasks, or subtasks. And the workflow is extremely simplistic, just has 3 statuses: to do, in progress, done. We'll use team managed for now, and we will give it a name. So let's make our project realistic. I am going to use an improvement plan that I have been working on to help the team improve. This is not very specific to a team, so I will be gathering information from the different situations and other different projects I worked in. Let's put it Agile Transformation. Usually it will just take the first letters of the name, but you can also just change it. And I'm going to call it Agile because why not? You can create the project and here we go. So this is the Agile board, and it drops us right away into the board view, which is the sprint view. But we're not going to be looking into that just yet. We'll go into our backlog just to kind of see a general idea of what it is. We have our backlog here at the bottom. It's empty, obviously. And then we have our sprint number 1 that hasn't been started yet. As you can see, we cannot start it because it has no issues. And this is one way and one place where you can start creating items for your product backlog, right? So you can click right here and start creating a story, a task, or a bug. But one thing that I generally recommend is to start thinking on the epic level. So thinking about bigger tasks that you want your team to work on. And the way to organize it is by using epics. So you can see here, it says epic. If I click, obviously there are no epics. I haven't created anything, but I can show the epic panel right here. Very new, nothing is there. And we can start creating epic from this view. We can also start creating epics from the roadmap view. So if we create on the roadmap, we're able to actually create epics, and this little sign here. We can also create an epic or an issue by clicking on the create button at the top. And we just need to make sure that we're choosing the right project here. And then we can choose any issue type, which might be epic. So there are multiple ways of how you would go about it. So let me create a couple of epics, something that would make a bit of sense. So let's say that in our Agile assessment, we have identified that the product definition is not as well done. So we're going to say that our first epic is going to be product definition and alignment. By the way, if you want to know how to collect all of the data from your Agile analysis or assessment into one beautiful presentation that you can show to your stakeholders, I do have a template that you can use. It's a PowerPoint template. I'm going to link it in the description in case you'd like to grab one and use it yourself. Now let's look into other things that we can add. Say product definition and alignment. This is pretty good. Maybe something around technical debt that is a popular problem. Let's call it resolve major technical debt. This will be our epic number 2. And maybe let's create a third one, maybe something around team building or team morale. Okay, and the third one will be increased team morale and team spirit. So these are our 3 epics that we have created. Obviously, they don't have anything under them. They're just epics. So if we go into the product backlog, well, if we close the panel, we don't have anything in the backlog, because the only items that will be appearing in the backlog are the items that are small enough, basically the items that we will be taking into the sprints. So let's open up our panel once again. And here we can see, here are the 3 epics that I have created. No dates, no issues, obviously. We can view the details for the epic in this panel here. And we can start adding description. So maybe product definition. Let's look into some of the items that we can add. So we open up the epic on the right side. You can see this panel. We can start adding description and acceptance criteria, and obviously start adding the items that will need to be done as part of this epic. If you have already watched my ZenHub tutorial, you'll see that a lot of it is very similar to what I have done there. But let's put some items here. For example, some of the findings that I had. So let's maybe add some deliverables. For now, this will be our deliverables. And obviously these items will be able to help us create the user stories, the tasks, and everything else as part of this epic. So I'm going to save, and what I'm going to do is actually open it up. Jira likes to use a lot of the breadcrumbs, basically all of this item, like links that show you the hierarchy of things. And sometimes it's a bit confusing, but you can kind of get into every item, every ticket by clicking the link. So I'm going to open up the item for this epic. Agile transformation. This is the epic we have just created. And obviously we can have the conversations here, comments, etc. But let's actually add child issues right here to be more specific about what we need to do. I have created just a few things here kind of to be more specific. So we will conduct a product definition workshop with stakeholders, create documentation in our wikis. Then we have also a workshop talking about goals more specifically, create a list of the product backlog items for the next big product goal. Put it that way. And then maybe also identify some of the KPIs. And now you have your epic and all of the items that are underneath the epic. So now when we go back to the product backlog, what do we see? Well, we have all of these items here in our product backlog now appearing. You can also immediately see what epic they are related to. One of the things that can be very helpful if you have multiple epics, you don't want all of them to have the same color. Obviously, you can read what's written there, but what you can do if you actually go into the epic, when you click on the square here, so this violet square right next to the name, you can change color. And I find it very useful because that kind of gives you a visual view of everything you have on your product backlog without the need to necessarily read into each detail. So let's refine. And as you can see now, all of them are now blue, maybe let's look into the team morale. We'll view all details and we'll maybe make it yellow. So let's think about the team morale. That's a good epic to discuss. So what is the team morale? Maybe we'll start with findings. Let's think what's going on. The team is demotivated. Okay, so I added some findings just to have something in our list. So we have team is demotivated, doesn't want to participate in meetings, there have been no changes implemented, and we have some people who left unexpectedly. So let's think about deliverables. Okay, so I have created a few things here just as an example, obviously, and let's add some child issues to represent what are some of the tasks that we might want to do here. Let me change actually the type. We'll put it task instead of a user story, just to have something different on our board. So let's keep these 5. Obviously, that's it. These are the items we'll have. And now we can go back to our product backlog and look at that. Now our product backlog looks more and more live, lots of things happening. Now let's go into resolve major technical debt. So I added a few things here into the findings as well as deliverables just to give us some ideas. So let's start creating some of those tickets. This is just a few things that we can do. And going back to our product backlog, amazing. Our product backlog is looking nice. Now let's close this panel here just to have a bit more overview and view of what's going on. And now obviously all of it is kind of aligned with the epics. They all go one after the other. What we can do is start to reorganize it. Well, for example, we can do the product definition workshop, and then we can do definition of done workshop. That would be good to kind of happen around the same time. We won't be waiting for the whole product definition to be ended before we would want to work on the definition of done. And maybe let's run a team agreements workshop. That's an important one that we definitely want to have here. So we have a few things right here. We can reorganize some other things in here. So this is how you would reorganize your product backlog. You can just drag and drop it. Very easy. You can also, if you click on this item and then so I have selected this, obviously it's going to open on the right. So I selected it. Now I'm holding Shift, and it means that I can choose like several items at a time. And it means if I'm moving them, I'm gonna move all of them at once. As well as you can also click on, say, Control, if you want to select items from different parts. That way you're not selecting a whole group. So this is Control. But let's say if you want to select the whole thing, you click on the first item, hold Shift, like on the last item, now you have selected everything. And it means that you can make some changes altogether to these items, such as move them into the specific sprint, or maybe move them to different parts of the product backlog. There are some things that you can do apart from moving them around. Say you have 200 items in your product backlog, which you shouldn't. That might be a bit too many. And you don't want to scroll down all the way to the bottom or all the way to the top, because when you create new issues, they will appear at the bottom of the product backlog. So you can actually hover over your issue. Let's put maybe this one at the very bottom. And you can put it at the top of the backlog or at the bottom of the backlog. So for example, let's say that we have created this new issue. It's at the bottom, but we want to put it to the top. That's it. It appears at the top. Automatically, it will be at the bottom. But then, in the same way, you can move it to the bottom. And now you can also do that in the same way by moving it to specific sprints. Let's put in these 4 items into our first sprint. So this is our first sprint, and let's say we are starting, our sprint starts today, and it's going to run for 2 weeks. Very common sprint lengths. Of course, you would want to have more description and potentially estimations if you are using estimations. I'm not going to be using it right now. And it means that we are ready to start our sprint. So we can click on the Start Sprint button. It is going to ask us a few things. It is going to ask us for the dates as well as the sprint goal. This is not mandatory, but It is actually mandatory in Scrum. You can also, you don't have to start the sprint to change those things. You can actually edit it and just click on this edit button. And you can say, let's say 2 weeks, it's going to automatically calculate it. And then we might want to create a sprint goal, which would be, so I created this goal. It's pretty vague, but just to get us started, create a baseline documentation for product and team in the team wiki space. So we can kind of start update it. Now it is ready. And let's say this is the goal that I'm bringing into the sprint planning as a product owner. And now we're thinking, well, wait a minute, we actually don't have any wiki space whatsoever. So we have some other things that we need to discuss before we would be able to actually accomplish this goal. And that would be define what tools we're going to use and create our first team page. Okay, so I have created these two, define what wiki tools we'll use as a team and create the team overview page. And obviously these items have not been added to any specific epic yet, so you don't have any epic attached to them. How do you change that? Well, you can obviously click here on add epic, or if you are inside of the item, for example, this one, you can click on the 3 dots right there at the very top. There are 2 different 3 dots. So this is the one you need to click at the actions. And you can add parent, which will bring up the menu where you can choose the epic. Not everything will have to be part of an epic. But what you can also do is actually, once again, open up the epic panel and you can actually move things. Let's say we are going to add this one to the same one. And I just dragged and dropped it on the epic and now it is part of the epic. So it's pretty easy to use and pretty straightforward. Let's actually start our sprint. And here's our first sprint. It started. So this is our Kanban board. This is where we can actually track progress. Obviously, right now, everything sits in to do because we haven't started any work yet. We also have pretty simple structure here. So we have to do, in progress, done. Maybe we want to add a couple of more. Let's add another one. Maybe in review. So we'll have to do, in progress, in review, and done. And obviously, every item can start moving along. So let's start with something simple. Create a team overview page. And say we can actually say, well, I have already created it. So it's in review. I sent it to the team for review. And now we can maybe start with the assessment. When we have these items, obviously we can actually assign them to someone. And I'm going to look into just a couple of things there to show you the important items. And as we are in this item, so I opened up, just clicked here. As you can see, it is not assigned to anyone. It means that we can assign it. Obviously, I only have myself here, so I'm going to assign it to myself. And here we can see who it is assigned to. And it means that at the top, we can easily filter. Say, I just want to filter by this person, me. So I click on my little icon and I can see it. And then we can add people, obviously, or we can clear filters, clicking here, or by clicking the same button. So you can see the way your board looks. So whenever you come back, you can see an overall overview of what's going on. And here at the top, you can see how many days are remaining. Now, a lot of people have the blocked column here. And they would have it here, sometimes here. The thing is that it can get blocked at many different points. I really don't like using that. I prefer to not have the blocked column for one very specific reason, because Jira has a very good feature that is called add a flag. And now this item is highlighted, so it's red, right? It has a little flag and it is red here, very visual, and it also appears flagged in here. And that tells me, well, this item is flagged. And it's very easy to see it in the list right here, and I find it much more visual and easy to use than having a blocked column. The problem with the blocked column is that you would move items into the blocked column, but then you would need to move them back. And that kind of creates a lot of confusion. At which point was it blocked? Was it while it was in review or in progress, or maybe before we even started working on it? So having a flag feature definitely is a great way to use it. So I definitely recommend using flag feature rather than the board itself. And here, obviously, you have your sprint. And once the sprint comes to an end, you can complete it. Well, I still have 9 days to go, so I'm not going to complete the sprint, but if we are completing the sprint, it is going to ask you this little item, and I do recommend you actually reading through it, making sure that you agree with what is written here. 0 completed issues, 6 open issues. Where do you want to move them? Well, do I want to move them back into the product backlog, or do I want to move them to a new sprint that this system will create for us because we don't have another one? We can also go back into the backlog, and we can create our second sprint in advance, maybe start pre-planning during the backlog refinement. We're already starting to decide what kind of issues we would like to add into the next sprint. Just a few points that can be helpful if you are clicking on, say, an item here and you want to actually get to the epic. If you click here, it only just asks you what other epic you want to change it to, but it doesn't actually bring you to the epic. And if you click on this, here is the issue. And as I said, breadcrumbs, you can click on this issue right here, that it shows you the parent of the conduct a product definition workshop. And this is how you can get back to the epic. So if I click on the epic here, I can see here's the epic and all of the items underneath it. Another cool feature is obviously we started this with the roadmap, and now we have the roadmap right here. We can open up and see what is the status of different issues. So we started working on a couple of items right here. We can see in progress, and it obviously shows us the progress bar right here. So when it is collapsed, it is pretty visual. This is one way of how you can organize your product backlog. There is also another feature that I really like using in Jira. It is the releases/versions. As you can see, I don't have it here, so we need to actually add them in the project settings. So I'll go in here, we have the sprints, we can add reports, and let's add releases. We don't need to have the code, so I'm going to actually turn it off. And now we have releases. There is another way of how you can organize it, and I would say that release can be used as a product goal. So kind of a bigger, higher level product goal, and it can be linked to a specific date or to maybe a specific set of functionality that you would like to deliver, or maybe a roadmap feature or roadmap milestone. So we can say something here. Maybe we can create a first few milestones, and maybe we want to have kind of some improvements seen, all of the key items at least started for now. I will call it release 1.2. So we can put in the description, should be maybe a bit more detailed, and we're going to say, well, we started today and maybe we want to finish right before Christmas. So I'm going to save, and now we can see this release, and if we click on it, nothing is there. Here's where we can go back to our backlog and start thinking about what items would go into which releases. And as you can see now, we have the version tab in here, right? And we can open up the versions panel. In the same way, we have different versions, same as we had epics. We can, in the same way, now add all of it right here. Let's say that everything we have right now on our product backlog is part of the release. Very easy, as you see, I have just selected everything and moved it into release 1. You would want to start with releases if you decided to use them, because retroactively changing what release, like what item belongs to which release, is a pain. I do not recommend it. And maybe if you want to use releases, start from scratch, planning for the next release. And if you have a very good product goal, you can use it as your release milestone, release objective, and then plan for it more specifically. So in this case, we have our version or release. Both of them are the same. If we click on the item, it is going to be called fixed version. Why it is called that way, I don't know, but They are different ways of how it is called. Releases, versions really is talking about the same thing. So now when we go back to the releases, we can see the progress based on the progress that is made on the items that are part of this release. So if I click here, well, I can see all of the items. I can see the status of all of the different items, how many issues are in progress, how many issues are done or in to do. It is very, very helpful to see it that way. And I find it very helpful to get organized from the get-go and know exactly what you want to do for every goal, for every milestone. And here it also gives you how many days are left. So you can really plan ahead and see maybe we have only a few days left and most of it is in to do. So we might need to get back to the drawing board and plan again. Do we need to adjust the timeline? Do we need to adjust the features that we will be able to deliver? Well, we need to have a discussion around that. And these reports can be very helpful. You can obviously add the release notes here, and you can use the information from Jira for those release notes. Obviously, it will depend on how well you are creating your product backlog issues, but you can also create your own release notes. And then once you click release, when the release is done, will show as a green one in the list. Right now it's blue because it is still unreleased. And in the same way, you can create multiple releases and start planning ahead. When we go back to the roadmap, we also start seeing a release. So this can be very helpful. As you can see, we have a sprints line that shows us very different sprints that we already have. And then we have releases showing us the date. Also very helpful because we can have a visual overview of what is going on, where we are at, are we progressing. This will be all of the things that you can use to help your team plan and use the tools that are at your disposal. Make it easy. It is not as hard as it seems. Really, you're using your product backlog to create items to plan ahead. And then you use the board here, the Kanban board, to help you understand where you are at in regards to your sprint goal. These are all of the key functionality that I wanted to show you in this video. So really focusing more on organizing the product backlog and organizing the sprint backlog and how you can use Jira. It is pretty straightforward. I don't think that it has such a big learning curve as it have been before. I think they really optimized their UI right now. It looks a bit cleaner. It is still a little bit confusing, I'd say, but you can, as you can see, there are some certain features that are pretty easy to use and can be a great help for your product owner when forecasting, when planning ahead and organizing the product backlog, as well as to your team to give them more visibility into the goals that are set by the product organization, by the stakeholders, the product owner, whoever makes those decisions. And it can be very easily shown in a visual way and used to actually present then this information back to your stakeholders. Maybe pulling up the roadmap in your sprint review can be a great way to actually have the conversation around the overall progress towards your milestones. I hope you learned something new, and if you did, like, subscribe, and comment down below what other features or functionality you'd like me to look at in Jira or Confluence, or maybe what other tools you'd like me to investigate and show you how to use in your work. And I'll see you in the next video. Cheers and Scrum on!